Jeff and Shari.
Okay, great. It looks like we are live on YouTube, and I'm sure Councillor Paulson will be along any minute. So I think we will call our regular meeting of council to order. I'm trying to work out my space here. I've moved my computer higher up so that I could manage it easier, but now I'm creating a whole other level of challenge for myself. Welcome, Councillor Paulson. So we will call our regular meeting of council to order and start by recognizing that we're holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Hoopachesit and Sechot First Nations. Are there any late items to be identified by councillors? Okay, seeing none. Any late items from the city clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Great. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
Move, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Solda, second. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we're starting our meeting today with the annual Mayor and Council address. And although it is not conventional to do that at the second meeting in January, 2020 was not really a conventional year. So I think we're just in a different world now. So on behalf of Council for the City of Port Alberni, we wanted to start this meeting with a short Mayor's address to close off 2020 and start 2021. I'll start by recognizing again that we continue to hold our meetings on the unceded territories of Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations, and not just to recognize that, but to appreciate both of those nations and to really appreciate the relationship that we've been able to build with them over the last few years on this council and in the time of councils prior to us. 2020 was a challenging year for our community and certainly for the whole world. But despite the challenges, there was much to celebrate as well. And today I wanted to highlight a few of the positives that came last year. When the pandemic began last year, many people saw their worlds shift overnight. People began working from home, some people lost their jobs, many people struggled with a lack of childcare, and the isolation took a toll on all of us. But we quickly saw our community jump into action, as we always do. Businesses faced these new challenges head on, closing when they needed to keep us safe and reopening in new and innovative ways with a confidence and a we'll get through this attitude that is very much Port Alberni. In days, our nonprofit service providers came together to adapt their services to care for the vulnerable members of our community in new ways. Record amounts were fundraised in a time of financial hardship. It's incredible how people came together, and even when people were fearing for their own health, volunteers continued to show up to serve those in need in our community, as the volunteers here always do. As a local government, we quickly amended our budget to respond, reducing more than $800,000 of expenditures from our budget in an effort to reduce the financial impact on taxpayers and our community as much as possible. Pretty much overnight in March, it began to feel like the sky was falling. But once everything settled in, we settled into the change, kind of into the new normal, unfortunately, and regrouped as a community. I think that our community has come out even stronger than ever. Through all of this, our residential development market has remained incredibly strong. We've seen many new small businesses open in our community. Significant investment has been made in our heavy industry sector through the SAN Group, Catalyst, Canadian Maritime Engineering, Huu-ay-aht First Nations, and more. And we've seen a true diversifying of our economy through projects like the Food Hub coming to fruition, giving life to the seafood and seaweed cultivation and processing sectors of our economy. This year, we worked hard to take steps to addressing the childcare challenges in our community, completing a needs assessment and then subsequently submitting an application to build a brand new community childcare center facility that we anticipate would be funded 100% by the province. We took significant steps on our Key to Key project, narrowing in on a route, working with property owners, and submitting an application for $2.5 million to the province. Council made some intentional and significant steps when it comes to land this year as well, disposing of some non-strategic properties to generate short-term and long-term revenue through taxation, and then taking those funds and strategically investing them in a new property to house our public safety building, which is a core initiative of Council's strategic plan goal to build a complete community that is safe, healthy, and inclusive. And although it's a topic that has become difficult to talk about in our community, and we know there remains much work to be done. As a community, we've also taken some significant steps forward toward addressing our community's housing challenges. We all know the issues of housing are complex, but this year we saw the completion of hundreds of new rental units. We saw the start to construction of more than 80 new affordable housing units funded by BC Housing. And we saw the commitment to funding from BC Housing of many more. And in the last few weeks, we've also seen 3 other projects submit applications to the provincial and federal government for housing funding as well. Council has sought to be a good community partner through the donation of land on many of these projects, as well as reducing fees to incentivize affordable and supportive housing projects. We know that there is much work to be done on many fronts, and we are committed to continuing to work with community partners who are so passionately working towards solutions for many different issues in our community. I feel like there are about 100 more successful stories, exciting initiatives, businesses, people I could highlight. Through all of the challenges of the past year, we continue to see new businesses, new families, and new people choosing Port Alberni. And to me, that's incredibly exciting. As a council, we are excited and optimistic about the days and years ahead, and we are proud to serve this community and look forward to a successful 2021. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ron, for the silent applause. So with that, council, we will move to adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on January 11th. Moved to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Washington. Any comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And that brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to submit questions on topics of relevance to City Council. City Clerk, did we have any input today?
Nothing at this time, Madam Mayor.
Okay, would you be able to just quickly highlight again for anyone watching how to submit input, or if they want to present their own question, how that's done?
Oh, certainly. So members of the public are invited to either send an email to council@portalberni.ca. They may also mail their questions by regular mail, or they can drop off any of their submissions by using the drop box that's located at the front entrance. If individuals are interested in presenting their questions or their public input in real time, if they could just contact our corporate services department by 9 o'clock the morning of the meeting, and we will make sure that you have access to the Zoom meeting details to join.
Thank you. And for anyone watching, there is another opportunity at the end of our meetings under question period to submit questions as well. So we have no delegations today, so we'll go to no unfinished business. So moving on to staff reports, item 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the certification of the Director of Finance dated January 25, 2021 be received, and checks numbering 147,686 to 147,938 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $843,797.38 be approved.
Second, Madam.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no questions, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 2, our CMP department, a report from our officer in charge, Inspector Eric Rochette, reporting on the 4th quarter of 2020. Welcome, Inspector Rochette.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Sorry I missed the beginning of some technical problems, but so I'm just going to do an overview of the 4th quarter, which is October to December, as well as I will go over some of the stats when it comes related to 2020 as well, and then I'll be open to answer any questions you may have. So as for the front page here, you can see that the officers have responded to a total of just shy of 3,100 calls for service during the 4th quarter. 2,659 of these calls occurred in the city of Port Alberni. The number of criminal offenses are down by 17% if you compare to 2019 for the same quarter, as well as the number of break and enters and are significantly down by 81% compared to last year, and theft from vehicles are down by 65%. The number of violent offenses are up by 19% compared to the same quarter in 2019. If you go to page 2, the stats are breaking down into different type of crimes. I will go over some of the stats and discuss some of the issues and concerns. If you look at the total calls for service for the fourth quarter, we had 2,659 calls for service, which compared to the previous year, it's a reduction by 6%. If you look then, you break it down into occurrence by crime type. So I mentioned earlier an increase of 19% in violent crime. So for the same quarter, so compared 2019 to 2020, it's 119 to 142. If you look at property crimes, we've seen a significant decrease in property crimes from 475 to 322, which is a reduction by 32%. For criminal code, other criminal code, which I'm going to break down later, but it's 231 compared to 215, so a slight reduction again by 7%. Drug offenses have been the same, 12 to 12. And total criminal code offenses, 837 compared to this quarter, which is 691, which is a reduction of 17%. And if you now break it down to violent crime, I'm going to expand a little more on that in a few minutes here. So if you look at assaults, the numbers are quite similar to last year, 62 to 59. Assault with a weapon or assault causing bodily harm, again, it's pretty similar, 11 to 13. We've seen a spike in harassment from 11 to 20 for the same quarter. And now if you break it down, harassment, you can break it down in 2 different types of calls for service. There's criminal harassment, which out of the 20 counts for 3 calls for service. And the other 17 calls are related to mainly harassing phone calls or obscene phone calls. Robbery, gone 1 to 4. Sex offenses, which include sex assault, sexual interference, seen a reduction from 8 till 6. And uttering threats, gone up from 23 to 32. And if you look at the other page, domestic violence, which has been a hot topic for the last year. Every quarter, we've seen an increase in the numbers. Hasn't been as dramatic for the 4 quarters. When you look at 42 for last year, gone up to 47, which is an increase of about 10%. I'm going to go back to domestic violence when we look at the totality of numbers for 2020 later on. If you look at property crime, which I mentioned earlier, we've been quite a drastic reduction in property crimes. So the numbers are quite impressive. Auto theft has gone 2 to 3, bike theft 9 to 6. Now, if you look at break and enters from business, residents, and other, it's been a significant reduction, like I mentioned earlier, by like almost 80% compared to last quarter, quarter from last year. Business have gone from 14 reports to 4. Break and enter in residence has gone down from 22 to 5. Break it down to other, which is 17 to 1. Now, if you look at mischief to property, which is basically vandalism, slight reduction from 97 to 84. Theft, which is a mix of theft over 5,000 and theft under 5,000, is 96, reduction to 71. Out of those 71, 90% of those calls are for theft under $5,000. Possession of stolen property, went from 1 to 2. Then shoplifting, big reduction from 54 to 10. A lot of this is related to the fact that I see with COVID, some restriction as far as many people in stores, as well. A lot of stores now have security, which deal with shoplifters. They don't always call us to report shoplifting. They just, especially if it's a first-time offender, usually they just ban the person from the store. If not, then they contact us, and then we deal with the actual charge. Theft from vehicles from 79 to 28. which is a significant reduction. And then fraud, which is the mix of fraud over 5,000, which is 4 of the 14 cases, and the other 10 cases are related to fraud under 5,000. If you look at other criminal code, cause disturbance, slight increase compared to last year from 105 to 111. Breach probation, bit of a reduction. And breach of bail, basically the same number from 51 to 58. Intoxicated in public, 36 to 46. Now if you look to the next page, it's kind of an overview of 2020. And when I put, you look at the first number, total calls for service. So you've seen a reduction of about approximately 581 calls, which is about 5%. So we went from 11,669 calls to just over 11,000 calls for service. Now you look at violent crime, the numbers are quite similar. It's an increase of about 1%, but I think it's important to state that violent crime, just below 32% of those calls are related to domestic violence. So 31.5% of the violent crime reports actually have been reports of domestic assault. Property crime, we've seen the numbers all year. So it's been a reduction from 1858 to 1607, which is a reduction of 14%. Other criminal code, we've seen an increase of approximately 9%. This could be mainly related to the fact that our crime reduction unit has really clamped down on our prolific offender, basically looking at breach probation, breach of bail, and we've seen in the previous few quarters an increase in especially breach of bail release conditions. And drug offenses, 73 to 61, which is a reduction of about 15%. And in totality, for the number of criminal code reports, we've seen a reduction of approximately 8% from 3224 to 3034. So looking at the calls for service, I think the main point that I've noticed is the main reduction in property crime, which has been the work done by obviously our frontline members, but as well as our member from the crime reduction unit, really focusing on prolific offenders. We've seen a reduction every quarter, and obviously that's what is such a huge impact for the end of the year. Violent crime has been pretty much the same. I think it's important to notice that increase in domestic violence. It's been well documented, and I've heard ACAUS discussing that as well as could be related to obviously COVID being restrained at home, financial pressure, but we've seen quite a drastic increase when it comes to domestic violence. And I don't know if there's any question. The only thing I want to mention is I had the chance to meet with all the managers last week for a city manager meeting. The meeting was canceled, but I've been here for just over 7 months now, and I feel it's important for me to acknowledge the work of a lot of departments we've worked with so far. I know we requested assistance from the IT department, park department, as well as bylaw and public works, and I've been quite impressed with the support from the city when it comes to work with the RCMP, and I thought it was important to mention it. I was going to mention it at the managers meeting, but I think this is a perfect venue to acknowledge the work and the support we have received from the city of Port Alberni. I don't know if there's any questions or anything that you want me to expand on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Inspector Rochette, and for that acknowledgement as well. It's always great for the community to hear, that different areas of the city are working together in a great way, and we've got a lot of people doing a lot of hard work here. So thanks for that, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing. Councillor Paulson, and then Councillor Corbeil.
There's some very positive things there. Just curious, the break and enters are down a significant amount. Is this an indication that certain individuals are currently incarcerated?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I don't have names in mind, but the fact that it gets linked with, like I mentioned earlier, the crime reduction unit, their frontline members really climbing down on prolific offender and respecting their release conditions. So by making sure they get charged for breach, they're taken away from the community, and obviously you can see with the numbers had a huge impact on our stats when it comes to break-in enters. Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil and then Councillor Washington.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Rochette. Just a question. These are all reported crimes. Is there a line that actually has where there's been successful arrests of the reported crimes?
I don't have the statistic in front of me, but if something in the future that, because these calls are like, it's a calls for service received where an officer has been dispatched to investigate. I don't have in front of me the numbers as far as like successful completion of like if it led to charges and then if it leads to convictions. But if it's something in the future that council and mayor would like to see, that's something I can talk with our records department and we can gather this information. It would probably give us a better picture of the success stories. For me, there's obviously certain numbers in there. It tells us that we're going towards, we're going the right way. But yeah, absolutely, it's something that can be add on in future reports.
Yeah, we had those numbers a couple of times, not all the time, but a couple of times from Inspector Hunter, and it was really encouraging to see, I think for the community to see how good of a job the RCMP locally are doing here. And especially there were quite a few areas where we were, I can't remember what the terms were, but, we were, arresting people and for ongoing crimes at a significantly higher rate to some of the provincial averages. So I think it was a really good news story about our local RCMP and always good to highlight those things. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have two questions, but Councillor Paulson got the first one and Councillor Corbeil got the second one, so I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
So if I can just make a quick comment is the other thing too, so we try to do as much as possible is if anything significant occurs, is something really quite positive. We always try to do a media release as well. So make sure the public at large is aware of what we're doing and some of the success stories. But I will make sure in the future that we add a little bit more in relation to successful investigations and the number of when charges have been laid and success in court as well.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Inspector Rochette, it seems like you were just here and you're back visiting us again. Looking at the stats, there's some very positive trends that I see. So I just want to thank you and your staff for all the hard work that you've been doing and the foundation and the groundwork that you've laid in order to improve our numbers of our crime in our community. You did touch on the reason for the increase in domestic violence, but the other violent crimes, do you feel that's due to COVID as well because people are being confined, frayed nerves, not enough to do, or can you pinpoint why the other ones have risen?
Yeah, obviously I don't want to put everything on COVID, but it has a huge impact, and I'm sure we can all relay on that as far as like stressors. And I mentioned it at other meetings as well, and it's not gathered in the stats here. Like something that I've noticed in the last couple of months, especially during the holiday season and close to December, as well as the level of requests for assistance for mental health, which is all linked to this as well. And just the fact that you can't meet all your support system and your friends and family members put a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and it's difficult to manage. And obviously, I have to acknowledge that it's had a huge impact on our numbers. It's not the only factors for sure, but and the other thing too, like when you look at certain crimes, like uttering threats, if you look at them, you break them down. A lot of them are related as well to domestic violence, obviously. So sometimes it doesn't go to the point of an actual assault, but there's some verbal comments made, and that lead to arrest and charges as well. So
thank you. Any other questions or comments for Inspector Rochette? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of this report?
Move receipt.
Okay, moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And thanks again, Inspector Rochette, for presenting the numbers.
My pleasure.
Okay, and moving on to item number 3 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, we have a response to the December 14th question period, questions about McLean Mill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So at the regular meeting of Council on December 14th, John Adams inquired via email about the cleanup activity on 2 properties adjacent to the McLean Mill National Historic Site and whether the city will be responsible for these costs. So at this stage, cleanup has begun on 2 areas of private property adjacent to the National Historic Site, which includes the barn, which is owned by Island Timberlands and under lease to the city. And secondly, lovingly termed as the Boneyard, is owned by Island Timberlands, not under lease to the city, and has been used by previous McLean Mill operators for storage of various items. So we expect the cost for removal of all of these items at the locations to be $13,000 inclusive. And those funds would come from the 2021 financial plan within the McLean Mill operating budget.
Thank you very much. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of this report?
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Poon. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. And item 4, also from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, we have the award of RFP number 016-20 for LED lighting upgrades to the multiplex.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a public request for proposal for an LED lighting upgrade to the city-owned multiplex was issued in December of 2020. Proposals were received and opened in the public at City Hall in January of 2021. And you'll see on page 17 of the agenda there, the summarized results of the 5 submissions that were received. I can also confirm at this stage that BC Hydro has confirmed that we expect to receive a rebate of up to $28,000. So that's in addition to the cost that you see there. So the $28,000 in potential rebates are not reflected there. So the numbers are improving as we go along here. So 2 options for Council's consideration this afternoon would be that Council supports upgrading the lighting system at the multiplex and approves the award of proposal 16-20 to Addy Power, or Council provides alternate direction to staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Washington.
Where is Addy from? Addy Power.
Madam Mayor, they're local here in Port Alberni.
Nice. I just haven't heard of that company. And do we have an idea of what it's going to save us when we go to LED?
Madam Mayor, we don't have specifics at this stage. It's something that staff are working on, but until we actually get the new lights installed, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what the savings will be.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. That should be good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for our director. The old lights, are they of any use after they're taken out? Like, are they better lights than we have in our curling rink, or are they better lights that maybe the Industrial Heritage Society can put in the old arena just rather than just chuck them out?
So Madam Mayor, part of the incentive, the way this incentive is set up with BC Hydro is that they may not need to see proof of us destroying the existing lights, but the idea that we're looking to move forward with new technology that are more energy efficient. And so the idea of taking that old technology and reusing in another avenue would not be recommended at this stage.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Would somebody like to move the suggested motion? Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to move that Council for the City of Port Alberni award proposal number 016-20 LED lighting upgrade for the multiplex to Addy Power in the amount of $163,707 plus GST for a total of $171,892.35, with $100,000 coming from the Carbon Trust and $71,892.35 coming from the Parks and Rec Reserve Fund.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And was that a question, Councillor Poon, or just seconding?
No, seconding.
Okay, great. So seeing no further questions, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Director, for your work on this. Always nice to see it go to a local company and nice to see us making these decisions. Number 5 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage as well, UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund 2021 ESS grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Council will recall in 2020, the city received a grant from the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund in the amount of $25,000, which will be used for the purchase of a mobile reception center trailer that city staff can use at various locations in the event that Echo Center is not a viable facility when we need to erect a reception center. So in 2021, the same funding stream will offer up to $50,000 for regional applications. And you'll see in the agenda package there at their January 13th regular board meeting, the ACRD supported staff's recommendation to partner with the City of Port Alberni and apply for this funding stream, as the region's focus for the 2021 grant cycle would be enhancing this same project. So continuing to enhance the mobile trailer and reception center supplies. So 2 considerations for council today. First of all, that council for the City of Port Alberni authorized staff to apply for the funding in partnership with the ACRD, or that council provide alternate direction or elect not to approach these funds.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know in some grants you have to match dollar for dollar. Is this a free and clear grant, Director?
Madam Mayor, it is indeed. So this is not a matching grant. So it's we would receive up to $50,000 in the clear from this grant opportunity.
The best kind of grant. Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, Councillor Washington, would you like to read that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni, in partnership with the Alberni-Clayquot Regional District, authorize staff to prepare and submit grant funding applications to the Union of BC Municipalities Community Emergency Preparedness Program Fund for the emergency support service of amount of $50,000.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're done with the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage for now.
Sorry.
Oh no, there's another one.
Yeah.
Further.
Yeah.
Further, the council authorized staff to receive and manage grant funding on behalf of the Alberni-Clayquot Regional District.
Second.
Okay. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and from the Director of Finance, we have the BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement for 2020 and 2021, an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we have today is a restart grant that was provided from the federal government for BC Transit. If you recall, the transit service was waiving fees for transportation in late March until early June, at which time we saw the restart of fees. Through this, obviously, there's a reduction in the amount of revenue that we received in 2020, and this will carry on as we anticipate ridership to be down. So the federal government has provided with the support of the British Columbia government a restart grant for transit. This will result in a $260,000 grant for BC Transit. But with that, we do have some amendments we need to make for the agreement. And by amending the agreement, we will be eligible for that grant. So today you have the staff report in front of you that is requesting that the adjustment to the annual operating agreement for that grant.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Director of Finance on this? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Solda, would you like to read the motion? Oh, you're muted, Councillor Solda.
Sorry, could I get the motion on the screen? I don't have it in front of me, please.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Or ask somebody else and come back to me, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Haggard, are you able to read it?
I am, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council support the utilization of the COVID-19 Safe Restart grants for local governments based, oh, wrong one. Sorry, I'd like to move that the Mayor, Director of Corporate Services be authorized to execute the BC Transit 2020 to 2021 annual operating agreement between the City of Port Alberni and British Columbia Transit in effect until March 31st, 2021, attached as Schedule A to this report.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any final comments? I just want to say that it's great that this is additional to the next one, which we'll be talking about the COVID restart funds. And it's great to see all levels of government recognizing the importance of transit at a time like this. So with that, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 7, also from the Director of Finance, COVID-19 Safe Restart grants for local governments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Another grant from the senior levels of government, obviously supporting the need for local governments' impacts from COVID. So what we have today is just an overall view on the COVID restart grant. Of course, the Economic Recovery Plan distributed $425 million for a federal Safe Restart agreement with BC's local governments. Port Alberni had a $3.5 million grant allocated, and that was based on our population of just around 18,803. So with that, smaller communities need a higher amount of grant because of their ability to react to COVID, obviously, is limited compared to other municipalities. We have a very limited tax base, and that is based on our property taxes, where other local governments might have larger revenue sources from other means. So this grant is intended to provide the ability for local governments to continue to do the good work that we're doing, provide the services that the community needs while we go through these difficult times. And it's intended for operational expenses. So with this grant, some of the eligible costs that are, or expenses or revenues that were impacted, and addressing the revenue shortfalls is one of the items that could be covered through this grant. Any facility operating or reopening costs could be utilized with this grant. Some emergency planning or response costs could be utilized. Bylaw enforcement, protective services, computer or electronic transactions as far as technology costs that we need to incur to do business like we conducted prior to COVID. And there's any services that we provide for the vulnerable people of the Valley and any other related costs that might be associated with COVID. So there is some flexibility, obviously, with this grant, but it's important to note that it has to be addressing our operational costs. There are some limited options for capital costs, but those have to be related to some interconnectivity that we could perform with the public or any virtual communications. So there is some expenses that we incurred in 2020 that have been identified that are related to COVID. We noted that the Parks and Rec revenue is one area that we saw quite a significant decrease in the revenue over the year, and that's even with the adjustments that we made. So that's at $417,000 right now. Obviously, but we're just finishing off our year-end cutoff, and we need to finalize that number, but we'll bring that back for council. Our expenditures too are over what we planned, and that was about $82,000 over planned. Some of the COVID costs that we directly linked and we had project numbers for, we have quite a few costs associated with that we've tracked, and that was around $330,000. Of course, I noted there's a BC Transit revenue decrease that we saw year over year, or not year over year, but within the financial plan. And we're short about 107, but obviously with that restart grant that we got from BC Transit, that will have an impact, and we should see that disappear. And then of course the community gaming funds that we saw no revenue for 3 quarters of the year and a partial revenue source in the first quarter. So all totaled together, that's about $1.2 million once we take off that BC Transit amount. So within the financial plan, we have the budgeted amount in the 2021 year. If council supports us allocating these funds in 2020 to mitigate any of the revenue decreases or expenses that were incurred, the next iteration of the financial plan will show that funding come in 2020 with the remainder left in 2021 for projects that are identified. With that, staff will be bringing forward options to improve interconnectivity and virtual communications to deliver services that still need to support and the important work that we need to do while we go through the pandemic. So with that, if council does support, we will see this in the next financial plan.
Thank you. I have Councillor Solda and then Councillor Corbeil.
I'm really glad you told where the money is going to be, our shortfalls and where it's going. And do you foresee other shortfalls coming? Because COVID is not going to be over and we're still going to be in Zoom and we're still going to be doing a lot of things differently. So we're just going to keep some of the money just in case we're going to see some shortfalls. Is that correct? Am I hitting the nail on the head here?
Madam Mayor, I think what we will see some impacts depending on public health orders that occur. Obviously, we have our parks and rec facilities that are still open, and we still have expenditures being incurred no matter what occurs there, because we have to keep the lights on and keep the ice cold. So those are things that we are still spending money on. There's the Zoom platform that we're using that costs money. As we reopen or as we conduct business, we still have to do additional work. So those are the areas that we still would probably see the funding being resourced to, but the interconnectivity is one component that we'd like to bring forward so that we can still conduct business and make it more accessible for the public to conduct work with the city.
Thank you, Andrew. And I know the public, there's a letter in here making a suggestion where some of that money could go to, but it has to go to city facilities and shortfalls with the city. So it was a great letter, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go along. Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for looking. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for the Director of Finance. This Safe Restart grant is only good for this year and next year, is that correct?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. It's good for this year and 2022 if we identify specific projects by the end of the year. So as we go through the year and we anticipate anything that goes beyond 2021, we'll need to bring that forward and have that confirmed by council by the end of the year.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, I know at the beginning of the shutdown last spring, a lot of city staff had to start working from home. So the city had to scramble and purchase some computers for them to enable them to do that. Is that covered under this Restart grant as well?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that is a good question. And yes, it was covered underneath the Restart grant. That's that connectivity so that we can continue to do the work that we need to do for the city.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The only question that I have is early on when we first received or when we first heard we were receiving these funds, there was a lot of talk in other communities, specifically Victoria comes to mind, about using these funds to address the homelessness challenges they were having. It sounds to me like likely that's not an eligible, existing challenges in the community are not eligible for these funds. But I'm wondering if that was maybe just before we had received the funds, but hadn't received the rules on the funds. And so that's where that conversation came from, or if this is something that's eligible.
Madam Mayor, that's a good question. So within the eligible costs included, it says services for vulnerable persons, people living with disabilities, mental illness or addictions, or people experiencing homelessness or other vulnerabilities. So that's included as an eligible expense and how we support that in the community. That being said, there was some clarity on what could be done, and GFO BC and the ministry have been back and forth on just the expenses, and that still remains as a possible option within the grant use. So,
thank you. Okay, Council, with that, I don't see any other questions. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the council support the utilization of the COVID-19 Safe Restart grants for local governments based on the anticipated revenue and expense impacts experienced in 2020 due to COVID-19, and provide further direction to staff as to how to reflect the allocation of these funds within the city's 5-year financial plan 2021 to 2025 bylaw number 5023 through council's financial planning process.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. And item number 8 from the Manager of Planning, Development Permit number 20-05.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ryan?
Hi. Before council for consideration today is a development permit for the strata properties adjacent to the current Co-op gas station at the corner of Tebow Avenue and Johnson Road. The applicant is, screens are being shared. Okay. The applicant is Alberni District Co-op, and they've applied for a development permit in order to build a commercial cardlock fueling facility on these properties. This will involve a significant redevelopment of the southern portion of the site. If approved, the permit would apply to 410 and 412 Johnson Road, 4796 Tebow Avenue, and the common strata property, which acts as a shared driveway within the site. Recently, council approved a development permit for the Co-op gas station convenience store, and I just wanted to clarify that this is a separate application for the neighboring strata properties. These properties are Zone C4 Highway Commercial and are included in the commercial development permit area in the OCP. Staff have reviewed this application in terms of how it meets those development guidelines as well as the zoning bylaw requirements. In terms of the development, the applicant is proposing to build a series of facilities and structures on each of these 3 lots at 4796 Tebow, which is roughly the location of the existing car wash. They're proposing a 4-lane gas pump facility with a canopy. And these pumps will be unattended and activated by a card for commercial vehicles. At 412 Johnson Road, at the southern portion of the site, they're proposing to install underground fuel storage tanks, as well as an RV sandy dump station. And it is important to note that this area will be screened by trees and shrubs along the south property line. At 410 Johnson Road, which is the parcel directly west of the convenience store, they're proposing to install a parking compound for commercial vehicles, large trucks, that type of equipment. And this compound will also be screened from view with high quality fencing. And that was a concern with the neighboring properties and the residential houses across the highway. With regard to vehicle access for the site, the common driveway runs from Tebow Avenue through the site in a U shape to Johnson Road. And it's expected that there will be an increase in commercial vehicle traffic at these points. However, we've sent a referral to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and they had no objections with regard to commercial vehicle access on and off the highway for this property. So to summarize, issuing this permit will enable Alberni District Co-op to proceed with building a commercial cardlock facility on these properties. And this includes the construction of gas pumps, a canopy structure, underground storage tanks, a sandy dump station, and a commercial vehicle compound, as well as landscaping improvements. The applicant has worked with staff to ensure that their proposal meets all the applicable development permit area guidelines in the official community plan. And the proposal also meets all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw, including the site development regulations of the C4 zone. Council's options include proceeding with the issuance of the permit, not proceeding with issuance of the permit and requesting further revisions from the applicant, or providing alternative direction to staff. The planning department supports the issuance of this development permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council to start with? Councillor Poon and then Councillor Washington.
Thank you. Just a comment. Very happy to see that there's substantial investment in our community, and I think it'll be a good addition to have those facilities and I hope that it's not a disturbance to the neighbors.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to echo Councillor Poon. I'm really excited they want to invest in Port Alberni. In the report, you mentioned something going where the car wash was. Is there plans to take that car wash out? I couldn't get back to the report fast enough, so I want to ask it now.
Madam Mayor, to Councillor Corbeil, that's correct. The car wash will be removed, and that'll be the site of the new gas pumps for the commercial vehicles, as well as a canopy.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from council?
That's just amazing. I was thinking the same thing. How did he do that?
Thank you. I think I have a bit of concern here, just because one of the neighbors is a hotel, and I know that it was the use of that may be changing. But you mentioned concern from neighbors, so I'm wondering if we've reached out formally to neighbors, if we've had engagement from the hotel or not.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've had no engagement with neighbors with regards to this development, but that's not a typical process for development permits. We did, however, reach out to the applicant, and we highly recommended they reach out to the owner of the hotel. And we asked if they would consider, even though we have no authority to actually require, but to consider some sort of mitigating elements of their design, whether it's buffering, it's noise attenuation, some kind of barrier to separate that driveway from the entrances of the hotel. And the applicant is going to follow that up with the owner of the hotel if it becomes an issue, though we didn't get indication that that was going to happen. However, it is a matter for them to resolve internally within the strata properties.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm just, I think the intent of a card lock is often that you can go at any time of the night. And so it just seems like it's certainly not really complimentary next to a hotel. That said, I'm not really clear on what the use of that property currently is. I had heard it might be shifting somewhat. So I guess that's not normally a part of our process. It's just a bit of a strange one in that it is a gas station next to a hotel, and yeah, adding this on is a bit strange, but understand it fits the regulations. Are there any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Paulson, would you read this motion?
Sure. Just to the co-op, great corporate citizens in our community, and co-ops in general have spent a lot of money on rebranding, so their new buildings and stuff look really good. So I'd like to move that City Council authorize the issuance of development permit number 20-05, and that the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to sign the permit, including the following development plans prepared by WSP titled Alberni District Co-op, New Bulk Plant and Card Lock, is shown on Schedule B attached to this permit and dated August 2020.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no final comments, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and item number 9 from the Chief Administrative Officer, 5109 8th Street, the former Arrowview Hotel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, you'll recall that at your last meeting, January 11th, we spoke about Arrowview Hotel at 5109 Athol Street, at which time I brought a verbal report and to check in with council and see if council wanted to continue the same city's same approach in terms of the demolition of that building, or if council wanted to be more proactive in engaging with the owner. Council directed that that I reach out to Mr. Potty, the owner, and express the city's thanks for the work completed to date, and inquire as to Mr. Potty's plans to complete the remediation and cleanup, and which I did on January 12th, at which time Mr. Potty expressed that he has been delayed somewhat in his activities due to the COVID pandemic. He's been challenged to keep staff on his projects, he told me. although he does have a plan to complete that work soon, and at which time he would construct a more robust wooden fence around the site and essentially a construction site or a construction site fence. And he, Mr. Potty said that he would be submitting redevelopment plans to the city. And I did say to Mr. Potty, if at any time he wanted to interact with council, that council would be happy to hear his redevelopment plans. And he said he would be happy to meet with council at a time of our choosing. So that's my update to you, council. If there's no further direction, or if there is, this is a good time for you to give that to me.
Thank you. Comments from council. Councillor Solda.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would love to hear the owner's development plans and an ETA on delivery instead of 5 months or 6 months, 7 months down the road type of thing. It would be really great. And for the public, because we're going to be asked that question all the time. And it's still what it is right now. And I'm glad he's going to be working on it. But summer's coming and I think council should be able to hear what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all happy to see that building has come down, but there's much work yet to do. Optimistic that it will be, turned into something, and I'm excited to hear what he's planning. But I think we'd all like a firm timeline for moving forward, as the property is quite a mess, and we're seeing investment of all kinds in the surrounding area. And, it's always a shame to have a property sit for a long period of time not being cleaned up. Other comments? Okay, so this is just for information today. CAO, do you need any direction from us?
Madam Mayor, unless there's a change in direction, I don't change in sort of our course, then I don't need direction this time.
Okay, Councillor Solda.
So are we going to invite the owner to come and have a talk with us? Maybe not tomorrow, but within the next month or two. It'd be great to hear. Do you need a direction on that, Madam Mayor, a motion on that?
I don't think we need direction on that. I think that's something that's just, often normally done in situations like this. So I think what CAO is referring to more is, do we want to push for a clear time frame? Are we okay waiting until we have that conversation with the property owner about his plans? Or do we want to take a different approach with bylaw now? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I prefer to see us have a conversation with the owner first before we make any deadlines. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would agree. I think I would like the opportunity to hear out the property owner on what the plans are and timeline for those plans, and then move forward from there. So if council's okay with that, then we will just move receipt of this update.
Move receipt.
Okay, moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and item 10 is from the Economic Development Manager, linking Roger Creek Trail grant application.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is another of those best kind of grant opportunities in that it's 100% funding. It's the Canada BC Infrastructure Fund COVID-19 Resilience Stream. We took a look at the conditions of the grant and the opportunities that we thought were shovel ready. So the conditions of the grant are that the project has to be completed by the end of 2021, and that the land has to be in control of the submitting party, so or the property. We took a look at the renovations to the community placing station uptown as one opportunity. And then we heard that another grant that's coming forward might be better suited to it. So we took a look at other opportunities thought that they weren't ready to be completed by the end of this year. So put forward a project for linking Roger Creek Park with the west end of the Scott Kenny Trail. This is something we've been working on for more than a decade. And it's something that the community has wanted to see. And also, we're anticipating that it will cost roughly $500,000 to achieve. With it being 100% funding, we thought this was a bigger upside for the city. So we've been working to bring that project ready for its submission to the grant opportunity. And the deadline is Wednesday at 2:30. And although we can submit a council resolution late, we got the impression that if we were able to submit a council resolution with the application, that it would just help move the project along a little faster. So hence, this is in front of you for consideration today.
Thank you very much for that update. Excited to see this project coming forward. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to say I was really ecstatic when I saw this in our agenda package today, Pat. And Expanded Trail Work really supports our growing tourism market. It supports the need for locals. One positive aspect of COVID is the increased need for green space and outside activities for families to do. So I'm really supportive of this project. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Deacon, in your report, you mentioned a maintenance, recurring maintenance of probably $15K per year. Would that come out of just regular funds, or we're going to have to put a new line in the budget?
No, that would come out of regular funds.
Thank you. And if we want more details on that, we could probably ask the CAO. I know there's potentially some changes to the parks staffing in the draft financial plan anyways. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This may be for a different time, Pat, but I'm wondering if this goes forward, would it be possible to then link Roger Creek with Victoria Key by following the river? Or I guess not all of that property would be within our jurisdiction, would it?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Corbeil, our hope is that eventually we will have a trail running from Victoria Key up through the entire Roger Creek ravine to the Log Train Trail, across the Log Train Trail, and then down through Dry Creek. So that's the ultimate game plan. And the portion of the route that you've asked about is in fact in the application for the Connect the Key project. So we're hoping that it will be funded. And we did check with the fund administrators before we completely settled on the linking the Roger Creek Trails project. One of the concerns that we had was that two trail projects, this one and the Connect the Keys, might represent a challenge for them in considering funding opportunities for communities. And they assured us that was not the case, that the applications would be considered on their merits. They too were actually quite excited to see that we're making applications for trail activity during or through the pandemic period. We've made a point that we're behind other communities in terms of lifestyle amenities. And so we're anxious to catch up. I think I might say one other thing. The path for the trail would run through a very steep slope on the to the south of Roger Creek and east of the trestle and the train trestle. So we have Island Corridor Foundation's support for making the application, because we are proposing to introduce some slope stabilization measures. And we've also spoken to the owner of the private property that's immediately to the south and east of the trestle. And he's indicated that we'll have a letter of support for him by the end of today. I spoke with him this morning after Councillor Washington had given me some contact information, and he sounded very keen to see us go forward with this. So.
Okay, thanks, Pat. That's great news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had Councillor Solda next.
Pat, just a quick question. I remember discussions years ago about the Scott Kenny Trail, but are we putting lights in, or some kind of lights for safety? Because we had some issues in the past with trails. And also, I haven't been on that trail, so I really I don't know what's on it. And the other one is signs, just like information signs. So when a person walks the trail, oh, wow, okay, I didn't realize this, whatever tree is that, right? Or something out there. So are we going to be able to do any of that?
So we're definitely putting wayfinding signs and interpretive signs on the trail. The wayfinding signs, in large part because we know the Alberni Valley Search and Rescue Squad has been down in the Roger Creek Ravine on several occasions over the last few years. Interpretive signs as well that will speak to different points of interest, talk about fisheries habitat that is there, as well as the creek. We're putting a budget item forward for interpretive signs in both Nuu-chah-nulth and English language. We haven't introduced lighting as a cost item in the trail, but we still have 48 hours. So we'll take a harder look at that.
Because I don't know if you remember in the past, somebody walked a trail and landed up getting accosted, and it would be great to have some kind of lights in some of the darker areas. And also, because of when you brought up search and rescue, if somebody hurts themselves, they can't say, well, I'm like 5 hours out of the trail or something like that. Like, you know how in some places they have numbers, you're at 0.1, 0.2, and it would be great if somebody got injured. I could say, if I was with them, we're at point number 6. So the search and rescue knows exactly where we are. So when you do the signs, maybe they could have like a number on them, so anybody that does get injured can make a call.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a great idea. And these are the types of things that will go into a greater strategy around signage on this trail, certainly, and others. Those are great points, Councillor Solda. I think we don't need to get into any more details on the project today.
I think my concern, Madam Mayor, was the lights more so.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the lights are a great point. And we've talked a lot about lights for the key to key path, wanting to make sure that that's a lit trail. I think if there's any chance of making this a lit portion, then that would absolutely add to the usability of the trail for people. So thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Solda, would you like to read this motion?
Yep. Parks and Rec, whatever. Madam Mayor, is it, okay, so we start with reported? No, reported dated.
So item 10, that council for the
Yeah.
city of Alberni.
Okay, I just need to find, okay, there it is. Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize staff to apply for the Canada BC Invest in the Canada Infrastructure Program COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream for the Linking Roger Creek Trail Project. The Council for this, oh, sorry.
Hang on,
separate
Councillor Solda, we'll do the next part separate. Yes, thank you. Councillor Haggard seconds. Any other comments on this project? Okay, great. Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And go ahead and continue, Councillor Solda.
I'll also move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni commit to the annual trail maintenance costs and any associated and eligible costs of or cost overruns relating to the Linking Roger Creek Trail projects.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any questions or comments on this part? Okay, seeing none, I just want to say I think this is a really exciting project for us, and I'm glad to see it being submitted. Councillor Solda, did you have a question or?
No, I'm doing a wrong thing.
Sure, I hear you. Okay, great. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Pat, and everyone else for your work on this project. Item number 11 from the Director of Finance, we have the 2021 and 2022 property and liability insurance policy renewals.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So earlier in 2020, Council had asked staff to investigate the insurance for property and liability in reflection of the increased costs that were incurred in 2020. With that, originally the plan was to go to an RFP, but Council direction was sought in November, and we went to both Aon, our current provider of property and liability insurance, and also went to MIA BC for quotes for both streams of insurance. What was intended was to provide an apples to apple comparison between MIA and Aon, but mindful that the insurance policies do not meet exactly, we have very similar coverages provided by both MIA and Aon in the quote. So some key differences that we saw within the two policies and the quotes that were provided was that MIA provided a $40 million limit with no aggregates, and it's subject to specific extensions of coverage. And currently the city has a $25 million commercial general liability with a $25 million umbrella policy. So there's a gap of about $10 million in overall liability coverage there. That being said, in discussions with Aon and the back and forth, they felt that the $50 million might have been excessive at that time, and the $40 million based on a review would be adequate for the city of Port Alberni. Another item that we wanted to pull out as far as differences was the Aon has a lower deductible for earthquake per occurrence, whereas MIA had a deductible of $250,000 and Aon had $100,000 in their $100,000 in their policy renewal. That being said, we sought some information for our Emergency Management BC, and there's the Disaster Resistance Fund that would cover 80% of any recovery costs that a local government would incur. And as long as we have that property insured, and then the deductibles during that event will be covered through Emergency Management BC. So that resolved that gap in coverage there. So with MIA, it's a shift from an underwriter to a reciprocal insurance exchange agreement. So that's a slightly different policy than we're used to. And this is something that requires membership and council agreeing to a 3-year term with MIA BC. So it's the municipalities of British Columbia that are all members of this group, and there's quite a large percentage of the municipalities in BC. I believe it's about 90% of the municipalities are with MIA BC. with that, there is a request to council also to move forward on a cyber liability policy. Something that we didn't have with Aon, but is approximately $10,000 additional premium. That's something that we could get down depending on our questionnaire and what we respond back to MIABC. And there might be some gaps in the service that we need to provide, and we can still proceed with Aon for some components of the policy in the short term, but those amounts will not cost a significant amount to the city if we move forward on that while we have the transition. So with the cost, obviously the cost between the two programs are quite a bit different between the two quotes that we received, and we will be under the amount that we had budgeted in the financial plan. But with that, we would like to do some risk assessments throughout 2021 to ensure that we fill any or mitigate any gaps for risk.
The executive action I'm signing today will not only require the...
So I got Joe Biden piping in on the meeting already there. So. With that, there are some agreements that have to be signed by the end of the month. So we have a short period here that we have to turn around and get signed with MIBC. So the request is that council makes a decision today and moves forward with MIBC if council supports that and continues on with what is required through Aon as we need to meet our insurance liability and coverage through the transition. So with that, that's all I have. And
thank you for your work on getting this information in front of us, and also for researching MIA. I know it's something that we've been asking about for a while, and it maybe wasn't the right time, but I'm happy to see a difference of almost $200,000 between the two quotes, recognizing that there's some things we will need to add on. I think this is a great first step, and I think the idea of risk assessment, proper risk assessment, given what just happened at McLean Mill, is prudent, and I'm looking forward to hearing more detail on that. Questions from council? Councillor Corbeil, and then Poon, and then Washington.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Just a question. We were kind of taken back at just $100,000 pollution cleanup insurance when we were with Aon. I see MIA is only $50,000. Can you comment? Does it cost a small fortune to get really decent coverage for pollution cleanup?
So, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Corbeil, that's a great question, and that's something that we need to bring back to council. Obviously, with what has happened at McLean's Mill and the coverage that we had within our policy, we need to better understand what's required. So, in talking with both Aon and MIABC, there needs to be an inventory of what we have as far as assets out there that might have possible impacts for environmental risk. And once we have those exposures, then we provide that information, and then we would get a quote for that. And that's specifically for any environmental impacts for liability and property cleanup.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Very pleased to see the difference in the insurance quotes, and you know, especially with the tightening and very competitive insurance market that we're in right now. So I'm glad that we have some options, even though the market is tight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Corbeil, you got my question. I was just worried about any little environmental disasters, because it could be anything from what unfortunately happened at McLean Mill to one of like the paving patch truck spraying a leak or anything like that. I just want to make sure we have sufficient insurance on that kind of stuff, because as we know, the environmental costs for cleanup can be very huge. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that for me, this is the time for us to really assess what our risks are. We have many, agreements with third parties and assets that we are insuring where volunteers or other organizations are managing and or working on equipment. I would like to get a really thorough understanding of what our risk is and begin to relook at some of these agreements that we have in place. We, just had a $1.25 million accident. Hopefully an accident, hopefully it wasn't intentional, but of course that hasn't been determined yet. So I think that now is the time to take a very serious look at the liabilities we may have in place outside of McLean Mill as well, and possibly make some hard decisions about partnerships that we have. We have to understand what our risk is and understand what is acceptable risk and what isn't going forward. Councillor Solda, did you have a question?
Actually, you said basically what I was going to ask and say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last year at this time, I think we had quite a big shock at the increased insurance coverage, but the positive side is we've done a thorough review of what we need and what's being offered in the insurance industry. And we've decided to go with something that most other municipalities already go with. So I think that's a really good move. So I know it was a lot of work, Andrew, but I think it's been a very worthwhile exercise for us to go through. Even personally, it's something that we should all go through on a regular basis. And also you mentioned cyber liability. Cyber crime is one of the growing risks facing businesses and municipalities right now. So I'm really glad we have coverage on that as well. You just never know what and when something like that could happen. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Councillor Poon, would you like to read this motion?
Unfortunately, I don't have this motion in front of me. Could it be displayed on the screen?
Sure. No, we'll just get Councillor Paulson. Could you read it?
I'd like to move that council authorize the mayor and the director of corporate services to enter into a reciprocal insurance exchange agreement with the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia for a 3-year term commencing January 31st, 2021 for the purpose of providing liability and property insurance coverage for the city of Port Alberni.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Thank you. And you can continue on the next one.
And also, I'd like to move that council authorize staff to obtain $2 million cyber liability coverage from MIABC at an additional cost of $10,600.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no final comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
The gas tank in my tablet is just about done, so I might have to exit and phone in, but
okay.
I will continue on the hair string right here.
Okay, wonderful. We'll expect your arrival on the phone shortly. Okay, item number 12 from the Director of Finance, or possibly Deputy Director of Finance, I think. Permissive tax exemption, permissive tax impact to public places of worship for the 2020 taxation year. And I think we have Rosalind coming on for this.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor.
Welcome.
So the report in front of you details the impact to public places of worship regarding amendments to our 2019 Public Places Exemption Bylaw. So just to review, give you a little bit of background. So following a delegation of council on December 14th, 2020 by Mr. Ashok Sharma, the president of the Sri Sanatan Dharam Society at 4332 Scott Street. My apologies if I got some of that pronunciation wrong. He wanted to bring to council the attention of the policy and the impact it has had on his temple. So I've prepared this report detailing why the policy was changed, how it was changed, and the impacts to the public places of worship. So the background on this is in 2019, we did do a detailed review of the exemption policy and practices. We did look at best practices by neighboring municipalities and did come up with a new policy. So at early spring 2019, Council did approve amending the policy, which included a cap on land and improvements owned by public places of worship in excess of half an acre. So we did have that policy come through. When we had applications come through for approval, we did look at a number of different factors. We looked at size of property, church capacity, financial viability, as well as scaled drawings of the lands, the playgrounds and fields provided in the exemption application. We did ensure that the public places of worship received the amended policy with the application that was sent out right after the approval of the new policy. And then we did make all of the amendments and approve the policy October 15th, 2019. So the results of that, it did affect 8 organizations by the change in policy. So public places of worship were impacted by $9,300 and some odd dollars for the 2020 taxation year. Specifically, the Saran Satan Duran Society did receive an exemption of $623, which was 19% of total taxes owed. In 2019, prior to the amendment for that taxation year, churches were granted 100% exemption prior to the change in policy. We do have a couple alternatives that a council can look at for future years. Unfortunately, for the 2022 taxation year, we have now closed that, but we can look at amending future years within the bylaw. So we can look at directing staff to leave the policy as is for the permissive tax bylaw, which is the 2020 to 2023 period, and review additional alternatives for 2024 to 2027 bylaw time. Or we can direct staff to review a policy and give guidance that will shape alternative recommendations and bring that forth for the 2022 permissive taxation year. So the table in front of you shows all affected 8 organizations and the total levies for the year. So just to let you know, the total taxation exemption was just under 4% of our total permissive tax exemptions for that year. In prior years, the total exemption for the public places of worship mentioned was 7% of the total tax exemption. So we do have a cap of 15% of taxation amounts dedicated for permissive tax exemptions. This year, it totaled $271,430 for the current year. Our total exemptions granted were $250,326.
Thank you.
So with that, you're very welcome. Any questions?
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just to get it clear, the churches, you had mentioned something, the churches had to pay 100% and didn't pay 100, they got 100% off on their taxes. But I know in one time that it was only on, they only got it off, an exemption, if they were using it as a church. If they were using it as a parking lot or anything, they got taxed. That hasn't really changed, has it? Just to clarify what you were saying.
So to clarify, there is a statutory exemption for the actual building itself. The land that surrounds the building, that's where the policy changed. So they have a statutory exemption for their building, and then any of the land surrounding it is what we would give permissive taxation on.
Okay, so if churches are renting it to another society, like an office space or whatever they might use it for, do they get tax exempt in that business? How does that one work?
So if, let's say they, for example, they run a daycare out of their facility, the square footage that that business is run out of is not exempt. So when the applicant applies, we do require them to disclose any businesses ran out of the building. They also provide the drawings of the building and the square footage that's used in the different capacities. So if they were running a daycare, we would need to know the square footage of that daycare, so we could make sure that wasn't included in any exemption.
Okay, it's the same. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. Are there any other questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this document says that we're set in stone for the year 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct. The taxation year 2020 has already gone through, and then we have done the approval for the 2021 tax exemption as well. So the year that you would be looking to make any amendments, if required, would be 2022.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay, Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council receive the information report detailing financial impacts on public places of worship as a result of the city's permissive tax exemption policy amended in 2019.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 13 today from the Director of Corporate Services, the 2021 Virtual AGM and Convention Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Resolution Notice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So council will recall at your December 14th meeting, an email was received from Chris Alberni, at which time he was requesting council consider submitting a resolution to the 2021 AVICC convention. It was also at that time that council acquired as to the 2021 AGM convention timeline and submission deadline. Council also commented on the opportunity to discuss other potential resolutions for submission, in particular, perhaps those that align with council's strategic priorities. So staff have prepared this report, which speaks to resolution requirements and the deadline for submission. It also invites the opportunity for council to provide direction in supporting Mr. Alberni's resolution that he had identified at the December 14th meeting. And again, the opportunity for council to consider any other resolutions over and above that. Since the writing of that report, we did receive a further email from AVICC this morning, which has now determined the virtual convention date will be held May 28th, but the resolution deadline of February 26th does not change. If there are resolutions that council would like to submit for consideration at the convention, this report is encouraging council to identify those and then direct staff to bring back a follow-up report so we could spend time researching if that topic has been considered at previous conventions. And that's everything.
Thank you very much. Council, are there questions or suggestions on moving forward for this? Councillor Solda.
Are you referring moving forward on resolutions or moving on the resolution that Chris has put forward?
Both. So if there's, we can have a brief conversation here before passing along to staff any items that are of interest for us to submit or any themes. And we also are welcome to discuss Chris's motion, a resolution that he put forward, if there's an appetite for something like that, or, potentially working with other communities who are already putting forward similar resolutions.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'm looking at, and it's provincial, federal, I don't care which government it is, because it's everybody's responsible, and it's to do with the homeless. And maybe we need to look at more supportive housing or transitional housing or the aged. was somebody going to say something? Sorry. Something like that. And it's just come to me on that, and maybe we can bring that, I can come back with more thoughts on that by next week or the next meeting. Or if it's too late, I will get back to staff. And yourself, like, we need to talk about that because it's not working the way it is right now here in this community. And we need to do something instead of put a Band-Aid to it.
Yeah, I think another thing that would be worth considering is partnering with other municipalities who are putting forward resolutions. And I think often something that happens at AVICC is so many communities put forward resolutions, and so many of them are similar but not the same, and they end up getting kind of lost in, you know, the big book of resolutions that go forward. I think we would be better suited to partner with other communities and really put forward intentional and thoughtful resolutions rather than just scrambling to get something in. There are many communities like ours, you know, struggling with these issues around homelessness and mental health and addiction specifically right now. I've been working with the Mayor of Duncan. We are putting together a bit of a working group of mayors from communities like Nanaimo, North Cowichan, Duncan, Port Alberni, who are struggling, you know, I would say the most of the smaller communities outside of Victoria area with these challenges. And so we're working on a strategy to move forward with all of our communities together as it is. So it might be a good place to spearhead a resolution for AVICC.
And also maybe we could let's send a letter to AVICC suggestion, a forum on housing, supportive housing, homelessness. It might be a good topic. Obviously, we know with COVID, it's been a big topic in all communities. And I really do like what Comox has been doing, and with their tiny homes and stuff. So it's something we need to have that discussion, and that dialogue might be a great one on the AVICC level.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to suggest that our next meeting, we should carve out a period of time that we can bring up resolutions. That way it gives us a couple weeks to think about it, and probably won't take as long.
I think what's being suggested here is that we pass along ideas to staff to provide a bit of input as to whether similar resolutions have already gone forward. Twyla, is that what's being suggested? I think Twyla's frozen. Okay.
Madam Mayor, Twyla's experiencing some connectivity issues.
She's frozen, yes.
We provide that response a little later.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Paulson, Corbeil, we absolutely could have a conversation jointly, you know, as a part of our next meeting. I think the challenge is that when we have this conversation, we often don't see on the spot what has already come forward. And I think there's a good opportunity, you know, very rarely are we coming up with something unique because all of our communities are very similar. I think there's an opportunity to advocate for specific resolutions that have gone forward. And staff has the ability to research if we bring forward an idea, and we can often be more impactful that way. So we could certainly add it to our next agenda to have a conversation. In the meantime, if councillors do have ideas on specific motions, I would encourage you to send them to staff, and that could probably form a bit of a basis for us to have a more effective and productive conversation about it at our next meeting. Were there other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to move the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council contemplate resolutions for submission to the 2021 AVICC virtual convention in advance of the deadline date of February 26, 2021.
Second.
Thank you. And just for clarity, would council like to add this to our next agenda as well to have a bigger conversation about it? I'm seeing consensus on that. So we'll add this to our next agenda as well. And like I said, if people do have suggestions, please send them to staff beforehand as well. So with that, motion is moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item G1, bylaws from the Director of Finance. We have the 5-year financial plan 2021 to 2025, bylaw number 5023.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have the bylaw and the attached draft financial plan provided to Council today for first reading. On January 18th, the Committee of the Whole, we gave a overview of the financial plan, and at that time I identified specific items that were changed year over year in the financial plan. So what we have today is just the opportunity for Council to receive the report and provide first reading, should they choose to go ahead and provide that. But noting that there's a 3.95% increase in the overall tax increase for municipal general this year. That was at about 10% in 2024 financial plan for the 2021 year. So that's quite a shift down from where we were. That was done through shifting priorities and moving around reserve funds and lowering the taxation. What is in the plan currently that is proposed, and Council could make changes at any time, is that the proposed spread of the increase will be equally provided across each classification. We have a lot of time, and the timeline that we've provided to Council is in the staff reports. The next opportunity, we did have some questions from the Committee of the Whole meeting on January the 18th, and we'll provide follow-up to those requests and questions at the February 8th regular Council meeting, and in the same format that we've done in the past to track those changes or those requests for information, so that Council can see those as we move through the process. So Council can do first reading today, and understanding that the process is needing to be complete by May 14th of 2021. So as I said today, we have many opportunities to make changes. Council can give direction. What we would like today is to have first reading so we can introduce the bylaw and now have debate and discussion as we move over the next few months here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So Council, I'm wondering if obviously everyone's had a chance to review the financial plan. And again, this is just the start so that everyone on Council is able to see the full financial plan document after the introduction that we had last week, I think. I'm wondering if today councillors had questions they would like to ask, or if we simply pass first reading and bring our questions to the next budget meeting, where we will be, have more time to go over everything in detail. The questions that have already been asked will also be brought with answers to that meeting. Councillor Solda.
I would actually like to have time. I would like to pass first reading and then come back and then let's take it up. Ask the questions so that for me in next reading, before next reading.
Great. And I think that's what staff is envisioning as well. And that said, if anybody has questions prepared today that they would like to ask, those can be captured so that responses can be brought to our next full budget meeting. Councillor.
Could I just ask one more question before you move on? Sure. Okay, so if anybody in the public, Madam Mayor, wants to ask any questions or make any suggestions to the staff, could maybe we let them know how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did at the beginning of this meeting during public input period highlight those options again. I will just highlight again that if anybody would like to come on to one of our budget meetings or regular meetings, they can email council@portalberni.ca and arrange to come on live. You can also send questions to council@portalberni.ca. It's also important to remember that people engage with each of us in different ways. Some people engage mostly in person, some over the phone, some on social media, some by email. There's lots of ways to engage with council. I always like to encourage people to engage as formally as possible, because then if they send an email to council@portalberni.ca and that's included in our agenda, then every member of council is going to receive the same input, versus a comment on Facebook or a conversation with one person. We don't necessarily all receive that. So there's value in every type of engagement, but if you are wanting to submit more formal feedback, then we would encourage you to do it through council@portalberni.ca so that we can all get the information. And great question, Councillor Solda. There will be lots of opportunities, and every one of our budget meetings will have a public input question period. So for people who want to come on and ask their questions live, they're more than welcome to do that. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Solda. And I'm actually a little bit shocked that she didn't ask this question, which was, is there a place where those who aren't so computer savvy can pick up a hard copy of this to go through?
That's a great question. Since you can't come into City Hall right now, Andrew, are you aware?
Well, Madam Mayor, I think we can provide, that's a great question. And honestly, I did not think about that. And thank you, Councillor Washington, for that. So I think what we could do is provide some hard copies of the draft financial plan, understanding that these will shift over time. So as we make changes, people that would like a hard copy would need to get an additional copy as we move forward. So we hope that most people can access electronically. We prefer to do that, but if there's anybody that needs a copy, maybe they could contact me directly, and I could provide that to them in a format that or in a way that we can meet and hand off. So
great, thank you. So phone City Hall. Councillor Haggard.
Madam Mayor, if we have questions, can we email Andrew so we can have the answers to bring forward to the next meeting?
Yeah, that would be great. I think usually we would email the CAO, and you're welcome to see it and send it to Andrew as well, just to keep everyone in the loop. But that would be perfect. I think that the more time we can give our managers with kind of advance warning of our questions, the better answers we're going to get, rather than asking someone a question on the spot that they end up having to kind of guess at. So if we can take the time before our next budget meeting to just get out as many of our questions as possible, then our staff will take the time to make sure we get thorough answers. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so with that then, I will move that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2021 to 2025, bylaw number 5023, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second.
Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. And seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And moving on to item number 2 from the Manager of Planning, we have proposed zoning bylaw map amendments. And I think we'll have Brian pop back up here again. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's right. Twyla for this
Actually,
one.
it's going to be me. Yeah, so hopefully you won't lose me. If I do, our CAO is going to pick up where I leave off. So council will recall that we recently sold 8 city-owned lots, 5 on Anderson and 3 on 14th Avenue. Through building permit inquiries on the part of the new owners, the city has initiated a rezoning application, as it was brought to our attention that the present zoning, which is future development, was proving to be a little problematic when it came to parcel coverage, and thus creating potentially a 700 square foot dwelling unit that the new owners would be able to construct. So the city is moving forward with initiating a rezoning to reflect single family residential. This doesn't have huge changes to the overall neighborhood plan and being consistent with what's currently in the area, but does increase the parcel coverage and would allow the new property owners to construct a single family residence that exceeds 700 square feet. So this application is put forward that the city initiates the rezoning. Additional information for council is the fact that the city has reached out to the new owners and has spoken to all of them, and they support the change, and they haven't requested anything outside of the single family zoning change. So if council has any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. We will start with questions if anybody has them. Councillor Poon.
Just curious if that unconstructed road will remain unconstructed for the foreseeable future.
I just call on our CIO, Tim, if he could add comment to that.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor, Council, the City Council has expressed no desire or intention at this point in time to make to sell that land or develop it in any other way. So at this point, it's still a road right away. And if we were to make that, if you were to consider making a change there, there would be some thought given to that before you made that move.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Madam Mayor, while we're talking about that right away, there have been some sort of neighborhood trails through the properties that we sold. So as part of selling those parcels, the city's undertaking the development of a low impact trail through the right of way. And the neighbors will also notice that we've been pruning the trees that are on that right of way so that they are better able to withstand the exposure to wind they might see, given that some of the other trees are coming out. So we're trying to replicate for the neighborhood what they had before.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Washington, would you like to read these motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the zoning map amendment number 44, 14th Avenue and Anderson Avenue, City Residential, bylaw number 5024, be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no questions or comments, all in favor? Carried. And if you want to continue.
That the zoning map amendment number 44, 14th Avenue and Anderson Avenue, City Residential, bylaw number 5024, now be read a second time.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried.
And that the City Council waive the public hearing requirements for the proposed zoning map amendment number 44, 14th Avenue and Anderson Avenue, City Residential, bylaw number 5024, in accordance with section 464-2 of the Local Government Act, LGA, and provide notice waiver for certain zoning bylaws in accordance with the section 467 of the LGA prior to consideration of third reading and final adoption of bylaw on February 22nd, 2021.
Second.
Thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Poon. And is there any questions on this piece or our ability to waive public hearings? We've done this before where it's permitted. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and correspondence for action. Looks like no items for correspondence for action. So we'll no proclamations. Move on to correspondence for information. City Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So to summarize, you have 9 pieces of correspondence in your package. First one being from the City of Nelson, and it was a copy of their letter to Minister Dix regarding vaccination priority for essential critical infrastructure municipal employees. You have a letter from Grace Dupertani, and it's relating to the current agreement between the city and Port Alberni Port Authority, and speaking with respect to land surrounding the Harbor Quay. We have a copy of the December 2nd meeting minutes from the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission. We have a thank you letter from the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. We have a copy of a letter from North province-wide ban on rodenticides. We have Stats Canada making information available that their next census will be taking place May 2021. We have an email regarding the Winter Go by Bike Day taking place on February 12th in 21. Correspondence from Poon regarding the renovations that took place at the Kingsway Hotel.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillors, are there any items that you'd like to highlight or speak to? Councillor Solda.
I don't
And then
want to
Councillor-
highlight anything. One from number 8 was already answered, but we missed a whole bunch of dialogue from Twyla. Did anybody else? I mean, it just kicked out.
For me, it just kicked out for a second while she was reading the list, but the list was on the screen, so
Yeah,
people should be able to see it
Okay.
still. But yes,
Thank you.
we are struggling with some internet issues, I think. Thanks, Councillor Solda. Councillor Washington, and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 5 from the City of North Vancouver. If Director Thorpe is still on there, can she tell us if we using this bad pesticide or not in the city?
Madam Mayor, we can bring a response to your next meeting.
That would be great, just for information to start. Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The second piece of correspondence from Mrs. Duprutani talks about the agreement between the Port Authority and the city. And I take it that the agreement was attached to her letter, which we didn't see. Could the CAO explain maybe what that agreement is? It comes due next year or something?
Madam Mayor, I can bring you more information at your next meeting. I apologize for not including that lease agreement attached. The city does lease some waterfront frontage, the gravel pathway that runs from the clock tower around to Water Street Wharf, for example, from the Port Authority. And we have been having ongoing conversations with the Port Authority about renewing that lease. It's not, we had no indication at this point that it would change from being public use. The Port Authority's not expressed any changes to us.
Thank you. Any other items councillors would like to highlight? Okay, I would just like to briefly highlight the last item, Councillor Poon, your letter. Just wanted to thank you for proactively writing this. I know that it's a difficult thing to face when mistakes have been made, to comment and apologize, especially when there is a lot of public scrutiny. So just recognizing that nobody is perfect. We've all done things that we wish we would handle differently. So want to just appreciate you taking the time to write this and have it included on an agenda. And with that, would somebody like to move receipt of correspondence summary dated January 25th, 2021? Moved by Councillor Solda. Is there seconded? Councillor Poon. Seeing no more comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And no report from in camera today, so that takes us to our council reports. Are there any items that councillors would like to highlight? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the workshops offered by the BC Economic Development Association on business retention and expansion over the last couple of weeks. And one statistic that they shared was that due to the pandemic, 1 in 4 businesses in BC will probably close. So I want to echo your comments that you made in your address. It was really congratulating our businesses for their resiliency and their ability to pivot very quickly in a difficult situation in order to continue offering services to their customers. But I also want to recognize the community for supporting our small businesses. They're the ones who create employment. They're the ones who support our nonprofits. And we really want to continue to support them so they can stay open. We would really hate to walk down our streets and see 1 in 4 businesses close. So thank you for the businesses and thank you for the people that support them.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. It really has been incredible to me over the last, well, coming up on a year now, which seems like just the craziest year in history. But you know, it really has been incredible how the attitude of businesses. And I mean, I know as a business owner and, you know, other people at the table here as well, that although we are often optimistic, it has been a challenging time for small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, and the community in general. But the community support that we have seen and the resilience in our small business sector has been incredible. So thank you for highlighting that, Councillor.
I think it's been a very, I was just going to say, it's a very another positive aspect of COVID is that people are discovering our local businesses and discovering services and products that they didn't know that they offered. So that, you know, with every crisis comes opportunity. So it has been a real opportunity as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other items councillors would like to highlight in their reports? Okay, I just wanted to highlight, Councillor Haggard, in your report, you spoke about the community action team. And because we don't often get this super nice feedback, I just wanted to thank you, Councillor Haggard, for your work on that committee. And we did receive just the most wonderful email about your participation. Just, you know, a brief quote from it was thanking you for your engagement in this committee and talking about the passion and understanding that you bring to the table. Your obvious depth and understanding of the challenges with the overdose crisis comes out in your thoughtful comments and input in discussions. So just want to thank you for doing such a great job and really good, important work on that committee representing council.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay, would somebody like to move receipt of our council reports? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any motions or notices of motions councillors would like to bring forward under new business today? Okay, seeing none. City Clerk, did we receive any questions for question period?
Yes, we have a question from Mr. Smith, which I'm going to invite our Deputy City Clerk to read out because of my troubles with my connection today.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Twyla. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. We have two questions submitted by Mr. Smith today, and they are in regards to the report from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage that was given regarding McLean Mill. And question one is in regards to obtaining a copy of the document that outlines a lease between the City of Port Alberni and Island Timberlands for the barn location that is owned by Island Timberlands, as referenced in the report. And the second question is asking the city to identify where on McLean Mill property the city-owned upper lot is located.
Thank you. That seems like information that should be very reasonably available for us to bring forward. CAO, would it be standard practice for us to just pass that information along to Mr. Smith, or should we bring that back to council?
Madam Mayor, I think we should do both because it's a question that is now in the possession of council, and the other public viewing this would want to see the same responses.
Great, and we'll just make sure we pass it along to Mr. Smith as well. Okay, thank you for that. And no other items of public input or questions?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, then would somebody like to move adjournment, please?
Move adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone.